There are so many political wars going on at the moment, even within the church and with the church. Everything seems to be an argument or a fight today. Maybe it has always been the case. There seems to be so much fighting. There's so much judgment and condemnation. It all seems to be so hard and so militant. And some would say that the church, rather than being this big band of all kinds of sinners, needs to become a smaller, purer group. In some sense, then, it seems to be saying this opinion to let the sinners go. It's the attitude that you only get in if you're not a sinner. It would become a very small group. Rather than being a smaller, purer group, it would become a non-existent group. And it's very interesting that when purity is spoken about, the presumption seems to be that it will reduce numbers. If you focus on purity, then you'll only ever get a few people. The implication is that purity excludes. It seems to be a very defeatist attitude and bizarrely a very negative understanding of purity, an understanding of purity that discriminates and condemns. And so the tension continues, and the infighting and the hardness. And where do we go? How do we live with all these wars going on? What do we do? And perhaps a natural thing to do is always that retreat into yourself, to be self-focused and to become that little self-righteous group that knows that everybody outside the group is wrong and condemned. There's no engagement then. It's isolation. And we can understand how this can happen. However, it is never of God. And that's obvious from our readings today. In the first reading from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, the Spirit didn't lead people into small, isolated huddles. The Spirit makes us stand up, and the Spirit sends us out to the rebels who have turned against God. We are compelled to engage with the world. It's not an option to cut ourselves off and think that we're superior. The Spirit leads us to engagement with those who are rebelling. And how do we engage with them? Well, St. Paul reveals the answer to this question. We engage not from a place of arrogant strength, but we engage always conscious and aware of our weakness and of our absolute need for God. If our engagement is not a humble engagement, it will not bear fruit, and in fact, it will not actually be an engagement at all. But even with the greatest humility and respect for those we are engaging with, we may still be rejected, ridiculed, and despised. But that shouldn't stop us from engaging. And that's what Jesus reveals in the gospel today. Jesus knew that his own people were going to reject him, but he still went to them. And the manner in which they rejected him is the tried and tested way of condemning and undermining the person. However, it's very important to realize the fruit of rejecting Jesus and the good news. In the face of rejection, Jesus struggles to work miracles. In the face of a lack of faith, Jesus struggles to bring healing. You see, in our world today, God is so often condemned for his inactivity. He's condemned when bad things happen. However, the world has to take responsibility for the curtailment that they try to place on God. We need to believe in order to see miracles. Without faith, we can't recognize these miracles. If truth be told, when we retreat into small, isolated groups, it actually reveals a lack of faith and a lack of trust in the power of God to heal. It also reveals a lack of belief and understanding of what it means to be pure. To be pure is to have the ability to see God in all situations and in every person. Therefore, there's nothing small about purity. Purity gives us an eternal vision and an eternal confidence. The one thing, however, that purity does restrict us in is in our ability to fight and to judge and to condemn. When we are pure and when we see God in the other, we bring peace, and it is a peace that the world can never create. It is the peace of God that is beyond all human understanding, and it is all that the Church should ever be interested in.